He was among the first generation of Indian public figures who transcended the pre-independence and post-independent era. So they were brought up, they spent their childhood and teenage before independence, which was a time of struggle for a lot of Indians, and then carried that forward from their teenage into democratic India. And I can see somebody born in a very well-to-do family, he could have lived a very comfortable life. He could have joined the BJP of that day, which was Swatantra Party, but I can see that he was somebody who would go towards challenge. So while born in privilege, he went towards labor activism, trade union negotiation, working for tribals. So, great human being. I am honored to be invited to speak in his memory. Something that, when I was looking at the portrait, that made me think, just for a moment reminded me of my late father a little bit. But maybe, as somebody said, most men of that period look the same. Because I think they all bought their glasses from the same place. But happy to be here. Now, what is the big gain that I had from coming here speaking? Because the biggest gain for me is I get to come to Odisha. If you ask me which is the state in which I have travelled the least of all in India, it is Odisha. I have travelled more in Chhattisgarh, more in Jharkhand, more in every state of the Northeast. If anything, I spent almost 3 years covering the Northeast, being based there. And that too at a time when connectivity was not very good, between 1981 and 83. But Odisha, I never came to write a story here as a reporter. I've never come here to cover elections. I've come here for a couple of interviews, couple of times to interview your Chief Minister, who's Chief Minister forever. And maybe once to speak at a media organization's function, but not really very much. And it made me wonder how little we know about a state as marvelous as Odisha. Now, how important is Odisha? I am a political analyst, or at least I claim to be one. I am allegedly a political analyst. So I divide the country politically on the basis of how many seats does the state send to national parliament. So I say all the states that send more than 40 seats to parliament are big states. So that is UP 80, then Maharashtra 48, then West Bengal 42, then Tamil. That's 4. They used to be Andhra and Madhya Pradesh earlier, and then and then Bihar. They used to be Andhra and Madhya Pradesh earlier, but those have been divided after the war. Then you have the next lot of states, which are medium-sized states, which send 20 to 40 members to our parliament. Odisha is one of them. Odisha sends 21 members to our parliament. But how little do we know about Odisha and its politics? If you ask me to speak for 10 minutes on say UP's politics, I may go on for 55 minutes and somebody will have to ring a bell or knock me on the head to make me stop. Right? But if you ask me to speak on Odisha politics for 10 minutes, I will run away because I don't know. We know very little about Odisha. And that made me think of the theme for today, because the options I was given, among those options, one was in the state of our federalism. The other was the price of populism in our governance and politics. So I thought I'll combine the two. Following the advice of my former professor in America, Steve Cohen, who used to tell us the story of this budding writer who wanted to write a big hit novel, first novel, and he went to a publisher and he said, which subjects are the hot selling subjects now? So one publisher said, write about doctors. The other publisher said, no. Write about lawyers. Third one said, write about dogs. So he wrote a novel about the doctor's lawyer's dog. Right? So like that I thought that maybe one subject is federalism, one subject is populism. I talk about both. Now, One reason we know so little about Odisha is because political change does not take place. Elections are not so exciting. That doesn't bring us in. Second, for whatever reason, you are about a Gujarat size state. You are 21 state, Gujarat is at 25 or 26. You are about a Gujarat size state. But somehow, your leaders have not painted that big on the national radar screen as leaders say from Gujarat have done, from Karnataka have done. You are the same ballpark. You are bigger than Jharkhand, bigger than Chhattisgarh, bigger than Assam, bigger than Punjab, right? But for some reason, Odisha has not painted that big on the national radar. So much so that I did not know certain things about Odisha, which I only discovered recently, sort of serendipitously. अपने आप कई बार सोचते सोचते कुछ हो जाता है without preparing for it. So what had happened was that in Tamil Nadu, which is also an East Coast state, bit far from here, but East Coast state, in Tamil Nadu there was a bit of a jhagda between DMK and ADMK over what should be Tamil Nadu's state founding day. So Tamil Nadu, Madras state came into being on 1st November 1956 with the passing of the State Reorganization Act, which was done on linguistic basis. So that was the state foundation day. But when Stalin government came in now, they have said no, it will be 16 July. Why 16 July? They said because we passed a resolution in 1968 to rename the state Tamil Nadu from Madras, and it was on 16 July 1969 that the state was formally renamed Tamil Nadu. That's why that should be our founding day. To which EPS said, former Chief Minister, he said, oh, when do you observe a child's birthday? On the day the child was born or on the day the child was named? So that was giving you a lot of trouble. So I thought, what an interesting country we are. A lot of the states are observing their founding day today. And one state is fighting over what is my founding day. So I thought I will read up a little bit about how our new states came into being. And I started reading up on the States Reorganization Act of 1956, the Justice Fazal Ali Commission on reorganizing states on linguistic basis. I made a discovery, and I must say I was shocked that I did not know that basic fact of general knowledge, which is that Odisha was actually the first state to be founded on linguistic basis in India. And this happened much before India became independent. I think it was announced in 1933, formally happened in 1934, and this movement had started in 1895. And eminent people like Madhusudan Das were involved in it. And once again, when you say Madhusudan Das to me, I say, oh, when I was a teenager, I used to collect stamps, so I remember a stamp for Madhusudan Das. But I could not even have connected him with Odisha. I mean, we know Odissi dance, right? But we know very little about Odisha. You ask most people in Delhi to tell you Odisha's history, right? What will they tell you? They'll tell you Kalinga, they'll tell you Ashoka the Great, right? They'll tell you Konark, something. But if you ask them, which is the state in the country which now has the second longest serving chief minister in India's history, after Jyoti Basu, most people will not know. So we get out of sight, out of mind. That is one. Or Odisha gets out of sight, out of mind. But coming to Odisha, it makes me think that Indian federalism, India is, we know our constitution, we are a federation of states. We are not a unitary state. And there's always been this jhagda over whether there should be a national language, there should be a national culture, nowadays whether there should be a national food, or whether there should be nationally forbidden food, right? Okay, national anthem, theek hai. But now you have an Odisha anthem, Jai Vande, Jai Uttal Janani, right? I think Karnataka has one. If tomorrow, say, Nagaland decided to have one, or a flag, like Karnataka has, there will be trouble, because that is the negotiation right now that's going on. So our federal system provides a lot of flexibility. So we become a voluntary union of states. Now I take you back to all the states in the world, new states, new countries that came into being after the Second World War. After the Second World War, and generally say between the First and the Second World War, and after the Second World War, through the process of decolonization. Now, of all the diverse nation states that came into being like that, only two have survived intact. Only two. Everyone else broke up. Russia broke up into 11 or maybe 12, right? Pakistan broke up into 2 next door to us. Even Indonesia, I used to think earlier that Indonesia did not break up, but even there, East Timor broke away. Every country, all of Africa's map has been redrawn. All of the Middle East map has been redrawn. Now ISIS says all this is ours. All these straight line countries are redrawing their maps. The only two countries which have survived intact, the only two diverse countries are Tanzania in Africa and India. India is several times bigger than Tanzania and several times more diverse than Tanzania. India is the most diverse country in the world because besides all other diversity, we also have caste that no other country has. We have caste that also does not go with religion. So India is a very diverse country. How is this diverse country held together? And why are we together? So we are together because over the decades our federalism has strengthened. In my parents' time, there was a lot of insecurity about Punjabi Suba movement. That Punjabis want a state for themselves, so Sikhs will have a state, it will become Pakistan. Like everybody must speak Hindi. So if you go back to the 60s, the big anxiety in the country was Hindi. It was Hindi everywhere, so that we become one country. And all the slogans in our country, Vividhata means Ekta, unity in diversity, unity in diversity. That means put everybody in the same homogenizer, press the button, boo, it goes, and everything comes out in the same color, right? That is what was being attempted. Now, in 1968-69, we know that DMK movement, Dravid movement, became DMK political party, and in a way joined the national mixture. Now, that was a big change. 50s and the 60s was also a period when India was dealing with its biggest insurgency of all time. That was the Naga insurgency. Naga insurgency began in the 1950s. In 1962, when the Indian Army left Northeast, only 2 battalions of Madhya Pradesh Special Armed Police were left in Nagaland. Naga insurgents had 10,000 people carrying automatic rifles. That at a time when Indian Army still had those bolt action rifles. I remember against the Chinese, our soldiers fought with those bolt action rifles. But Naga insurgents had 10,000 automatic rifles supplied by the Chinese. So Nagas just had to blow the whistle and they could have declared independence. Now, as a journalist, I learn when I interact with people. I was not born with much wisdom, but I get wisdom from people like you. When I get the gift of time and attention. So 2 lessons I learned over time on how India has become stronger than before. Because the larger statement I will make is that 1960s was India's most insecure decade, internally and externally. 1964 we had the conflict in Goa. We had the Kutch conflict with Pakistan. We had a full-fledged war in 1965. 1967 we had a big clash with the Chinese in Nakula. And 1971, at the end of that decade, we had another big war with Pakistan. That was also the decade when we had food shortages. We were dependent on ships coming in from America. That was ship to mouth existed. It was also the decade when 2 prime ministers died in office. First Nehru died in office, then Shastri died in office. So many things happened in that decade. Congress party split in the 60s. Many people had then written that India will now break up. In fact, Felix Harrison, who is a famous American academic and author, he wrote a book, The Dangerous Decade, saying that India is now bound to break up, the country cannot stay together. if you look at the history of our country, with every passing decade, our country has become strong. Why has it become stronger? The essential reason it has become stronger is India has become more federal. So I'll take you back from the 60s to the mid-70s. Until mid-70s, the center could dismiss any state government they wanted, right? Until mid-70s, Congress party ruled almost every state, and if another government came into power somewhere, the center would dismiss it. In fact, the first prime minister to dismiss a state government using Article 56 was Jawaharlal Nehru, when he dismissed the Kerala government, the left government in Kerala. He didn't like them ruling the state. Today, because of our democratic evolution, it's become impossible to misuse Article 356. Second, under Congress party, chief ministers have just become dummies. And you know that how did the pushback come against that? The pushback came against that from the people of India. So people of India said, people of Andhra said, you insulted Anjaya so badly in public. He's an Andhra, we don't like it. Right? So India understood that sentiment, and Telugu Pride, he launched his party. TDP since then has been a party there. Force, and today YSR is ruling it, YSRCP is ruling it. They are also working on the same regional impulse, as is KCR in Telangana. So state leaders then started coming up, and people of the state started feeling strongly that my leaders should also have respect, they should have power. See what happened, Rajiv Gandhi insulted Virendra Patil in Karnataka, and immediately after that, the following election, the Congress party lost. And since then, the Congress party has not fully recovered in Karnataka. So, this led to the rise of strong state leaders. Sharad Pawar. Sharad Pawar thought the Congress was not giving him the place that he wanted. In 1991, he contested against Narasimha Rao to become Prime Minister. He lost. He served under Narasimha Rao as Defence Minister. Then he was sent to Bombay as Chief Minister of Maharashtra after the riots in Bombay. He was loyal, but then he knew that he didn't quite have a future. So he thought, okay, I may not have a future at the center. Congress party will not give me that place. Sonia Gandhi doesn't trust me. But I can build a pocket borough of mine in the state. So he's never won a majority in the state, but he's the kingmaker in his state. If that NDA government is surviving in Maharashtra, it should not survive by any political logic, but if it's surviving, it's because of Sharad Pawar's genius. And similarly, leaders came up everywhere. Mulayam Singh Yadav came up in UP, Mayawati came up in UP, Lalu Yadav came up in Bihar, Nitish in Bihar. So all these people, Akali Dal, all these people then strengthened the Indian Union. Because suddenly, from having one patriot ruling the country, you had 28 patriots ruling 28 states of the country, of which even today only 11 are from one party, right? All the others are from various different parties. So India has become a truly federal country. Now, I give you those two examples of Tamil Nadu and Nagaland. The two states which looked like they were going to break away from India, and even the mighty Indian state did not have the strength to retain them. So I first asked a gentleman called Skato Su. Skato Su was a former leader of the underground in Nagaland. In fact, Kizo, who was the founder of Naga Insurgency, he had gone into exile in London. So Skato Su was the officiating president, provisional president. And he used to run the Naga underground government, as it was called, NAC, Naga federal government. And he was, when I met him in 1982, he was a nominated MP by Congress party to Rajya Sabha. So one late night, I was going from Dimapur to Kohima, so I took a lift with him. And on the way I asked him, I said, sir, in 1962, Indian Army had gone away from here. Why didn't you just declare sovereignty? So he said, we thought about it. You think the Nagas don't think about these things? We thought about it. We reflected very strongly. We had held a meeting in our church of church elders. And then we said, why are we fighting this war? We are fighting to preserve two things. One, to preserve the Naga way of life, the tribal way of life. And second, to preserve Christianity. Who has trained us and who has armed us? It's the Chinese. Where have they trained us? Where have they armed us? It's in Tibet. Right? Chinese took over Tibet. What's happened to the culture of the Tibetans, the Tibetan lifestyle? And what's happened to the religion of the Tibetans? It is Buddhism. Chinese have made everybody a communist and everybody has to speak the Chinese language. So if we become an independent country now, we'll come under China's influence. So we'll lose the two things that we are fighting to preserve. So it is at that point when we could have become independent that we decided we better stay on in India. Because people saw that India will accept diversity. India will be easy with diversity. Then Tamil Nadu. Again I was interviewing, and this is on camera, I was interviewing Karunanidhi for a walk the talk, which his daughter was, Kanimori was translating. And I said very hesitatingly, I said to him, sir, in the 60s you were called a separatist. So he said, no. In the 60s I was a separatist. So I said, if you were a separatist in the 60s, why did you break away? Why did you become an Indian patriot? He said, because the war in 62 with China happened. Then the war in 65 with Pakistan happened. Then we discussed amongst ourselves. And we said that in this region, it is not possible to conserve or preserve your sovereignty at a small scale. You have to be part of a much larger national sovereignty. So it is at that point when India was at its weakest that DMK also decided that they fate like this. So I give you these two examples just to make the point that we are a very voluntary union of states. That is the reason anything that is done to push at it will cause an immune reaction. And that is what I worry about today's politics. That there's so much of the domination of the Hindi heartland. In fact, some people I find in the south and elsewhere even object now to our use of the expression Hindi heartland. They say we are also heartland. How can only Hindi be heartland? But it's just that so many MPs come from there that overloads the stakes and power in Delhi. So there's a lot of effort to once again homogenize India. It's not going to work. India can only survive as a federal country. And that's why a state like yours, which has a strong regional party of its own, which is, I know that members of the family are also in BJP. So I speak it completely in a non-partisan way. It is unlikely that this party or this political force, which is a regional party, can be defeated by the BJP. That means Odisha does not weaken the country. Odisha, under a different government, under a different party, a regional party, actually strengthens the country. Because that is India's way of saying, look, we rule ourselves, but we are part of one whole. The other thing is, this push again to centralize laws. Right? You see a lot of centralization of laws. Law and order was always a state subject. But now you see NIA, ED, CBI, you see the fight that's going on between West Bengal and Delhi, central government, over the powers of CBI and ED. In fact, today, West Bengal Assembly has passed a resolution, a privilege motion against ED and CBI. So these are telling you that once again there is a push to homogenize the country, to push at the federal structure of the country, and there is an immune reaction for the federating unit, saying that we don't accept it, we don't want it. That's why people like Naveen Patnaik here, Mamata Banerjee, Stalin, Pinarayi Vijayan, Uddhav Thackeray, Arvind Kejriwal, all these are people who provide stability to a federal India. And that is essential, because that is not there, India will fail. When India was much more homogenized, India was much more unstable until the 60s. India had one dominant leader, one dominant party, and anybody who came in was thrown out. India was very unstable. The world thought we were going to break up. Now India is very stable. Nobody says India is going to break up. So that is a big change. So I once wrote a chapter, McKinsey produces this volume on countries. So they were producing a volume called Reimagining India. So they had many people from India, or many people who know what India is, 40, 50 people, write articles or chapters in that one, including people, Ram Kumar, etc. Usual suspects, all of us. So I also wrote there, and I said that look, this question is set all wrong. Because you can't reimagine a country which has not been fully imagined yet. India is a work in progress, and India is being imagined. So time to imagine India has not come yet. India is a work in progress because it is becoming more federal. And I had said in conclusion to that article that Jawaharlal Nehru did a lot of things right. I know these days Jawaharlal Nehru is not seen to be very popular, but he did a lot of things right. And I said I have only one argument with him. He got one thing wrong. And one thing that he got wrong was he gave us the slogan unity in diversity. The slogan should have been celebrate diversity. Because it's diversity that unites us. It is not, we don't have to put it into a homogenizer. We can just keep our separate identities ethnically, religiously, linguistically, in terms of what we food, what music we like, what movies we watch, etc. So that said, we come to the other part. I will just find out in 5 minutes, not really do anymore. The other part is populism. Now see, how did many of these federal leaders come into power and how have they sustained their power? You see Naveen Patnaik here in Odisha, you see Mamata Banerjee, you had seen the left before that in West Bengal, Arvind Kejriwal in Delhi. One thing common between all of them is what is called as welfare plan. Right? All of them spend more than they earn. Although I was told that your budget is surplus in your state, but all the states in India are now spending more than they earn. Because they know that that's the only way they can have a tangible offering before the voter. That I promised you this, I promised to pay your load, I paid your load. There was a time, until about 10 years back, when the central government would try to discipline the states, or at least counsel them, and say, don't do it, this is fiscally bad, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Then now you have a government. In fact, it started in the second half of UPA, when Sonia Gandhi came up with Manrega and also right to education, etc., etc. Those were big populist schemes, big budget populist schemes. When she did that, then a lot of the state governments said, we also have to do something. And if they do it, why should the central government get credit? This government in Delhi, Modi government, has taken it to completely a different level. So just as they have new central agencies which override the state's power over the law and order and new laws, they also have a lot of new welfare schemes. There is the toilet scheme, there is the Ayushman Bharat scheme, there is the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. There are so many, the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Free Food Yojana. These are all named after the Prime Minister or the central government. So what happens is states now have all this welfare stuff coming in from the center. And this is leading to two reactions. One, the states are pushing back and saying, you give us the money, we will spend it. We don't want you to get credit for this. Because then, when the BJP comes campaigning to the state, as we saw in West Bengal, they say, हमने तो इतना पैसा भेजा है आपके पास. We sent you so much money. To which Mamata said, but this is not your money. Right? You did not send it from your own bank account. This is the tax money. So that is causing tension because now you have competitive populism. Because state leaders knew that if they don't have much clout in Delhi, they are from BJP, they can get things done by Delhi. But if they are not from BJP or not from the ruling party in Delhi, then they need to keep their voters with themselves. And voters will with themselves so strongly that even if they are molested by the agencies or jailed or etc., the voters stay with them. So that they have to spend money. That is the reason you find so many states are giving free power. If you look at a state like Punjab, Punjab already had power cuts. It's a completely bankrupt state, among the most bankrupt in India fiscally. And now the chief minister who is there for a few months and the elections will take place, he has now written off a lot of the electricity bill, and he actually held a bonfire of electricity bill. We burn them in fire. Now that's a state which cannot even pay, distribution corporation can't even pay to buy electricity. They give free power to farmers and now he is now waiving power bill. In Delhi something similar has happened. But now there is nobody to counsel the state. There is nobody to counsel the state because the center is doing the same thing many times over because the center has a lot more money. So we now are dealing with a very juicy and interesting conflict situation. Therefore, federalism to survive and thrive, these state leaders have to survive and thrive. For them to survive and thrive, they need hyper-populism. See what happens in Tamil Nadu, Amma canteen, Amma this, and now Stalin is doing similar things because DMK founded that idea first of all, as welfareism. So, states have to be fiscally imprudent and engage in populism. Now, center does it twice so. So, states then have to get into competitive populism. So, you have a strange situation where federalism is important, but to sustain federalism, you need competitive populism. Now, this is a kind of situation which is not sustainable in the long run. So, something's got to give. What will give? We don't know. But because we don't know, that's what makes our lives so much more interesting and so much more fun. So, thank you very much for being so patient. I know that Odisha is not a late night place, unlike people like us. So my friend Pranav Roy and I say that there's a wrong allegation on us that we wake up late and we sleep late. We work 9 to 9, but we work London time.